Welcome to PR Powerhouse, helping female entrepreneurs to get in the press and to gain PR. I'm Jo Swan, and I'll be sharing how to harness the power of the media to boost your credibility and business visibility, no matter what stage in business you're at. Because I'm on a mission to show you that PR is not just for the big boys. In this show, you'll learn how to reach out to journalists and own your place in the press, because you are ready to become a PR powerhouse. Hello, and welcome to episode 9. We are talking about today the top 5 PR mistakes entrepreneurs make when doing PR themselves. So these are things that I see happen all the time, and they're things that are easily fixed. So don't worry if you're doing any of these things. It's absolutely not the end of the world. You can easily fix them. But if you don't realize you're doing them and you don't realize that they're going to be detrimental to your PR efforts, how can you fix it? So that's why I'm here today talking about this, to hopefully try and help you maybe identify some of the things that perhaps are not working and maybe help you just see if you can overcome some of those challenges so that you can experience PR success. So I totally appreciate that PR is a very specialist field. And if it is not something that you are trained in, why the hell should you get how it works? How should you be expected to understand all the intricacies of it, how it works behind the scenes? Like, how or why should you be expected to know that? As PR people, there's many things that we do not know about. We are not experts in other fields. I'm not an expert in SEO. I'm not an expert in websites. I just know how to do great PR. So I wouldn't feel silly asking for advice on how to improve my SEO because it's not my area of specialism. So that's what we're here to do. We're just here to help guide you if you're interested in using PR in your business, but it's not your area of expertise. So it's always easier to start with the things that people do wrong, I think, because then we're kind of highlighting the what not to do, which is going to set you off on the right track. So number 1. The first mistake that people make when they delve into the world of PR without too much of an idea of what they're doing is not understanding PR at the core. So in the first episode, we talk about what PR is and we talk about how it's different to advertising. And the first mistake that people make is that they don't appreciate that or they don't take that on board and they try to sell in their PR. And that's the biggest mistake that you can make. Because if you are being too salesy, then it's not PR. If you are being too salesy, then actually what you're trying to do is you're trying to advertise to your audience through the media and they see right through that. So what they're going to do is they're going to tell you to put your hand in your pocket and to pay for an advert because that is not editorial. That is not PR. That's not getting yourself in the media from a PR sense. So you need to be able to play the game. And if you don't understand what PR is, and then if you try to market yourself too heavily in your PR, then you're going to fall down and you're not going to have too much success. So many people do struggle with finding that balance of getting their message out there and being too salesy because they kind of think, well, what's the point in doing this PR stuff if I can't get to sell my business at the end of it? And quite often they put their product or their services before their people and their story. And that's the thing that is wrong. That positioning is the thing that's just not quite right because the story has got to come first. The story and the people have got to be the thing that drives the PR, and your services or your products are the thing that comes second. So unless you are doing product PR, which is pure product placement, that's a very different ballgame. But what we're talking about is PR for services, PR for professionals, for individuals, profile PR, for coaches and that kind of thing. So with that kind of PR, you need to be putting people before products. And with this kind of personal profile PR, we have to understand that it is the story that is what the media want and that actually you have to really incorporate that story to play the PR game. So PR and advertising are very different. You're expected to pay to promote your business if that's purely all you want to do. But if you are prepared to share some knowledge, some experience, some advice, then that's when it becomes PR because that's when it becomes useful to the reader. That's when it becomes motivational or inspiring. So that's what you've got to consider. You've got to consider, have you got that balance right? Where are you on that line of marketing, sales, PR? Where is your content sitting in terms of what you're trying to pitch to the media? And if it's too far towards the sales end, that might be why you're not having much success. Okay, so point number 2. What is the second mistake, the most common mistake that we see that people make when they are doing their own PR? This one might sound like I'm being a little bit mean, but number 2 is that people are lazy. And there's degrees of this, obviously, in terms of just how lazy people are. But what I mean by being too lazy is just not going far enough with that background work. So just not going far enough with doing the work for the journalists. And sometimes this is because people presume that it's the journalist's job to do all the digging, and it's the journalist's job to find the nuts and bolts and all the little nitty-gritty details of the story. But actually, they don't really want to do that job, and they don't really have time to do that job. So what they want is a story handed to them on a plate. And they want that story to be perfectly crafted in a way that they could just lift it. So the absolute ultimate dream for PR is to get some content that you have written literally lifted and copied and pasted directly into a publication. Because the dream of that is that your words are being used exactly as you intended. It's a win-win situation because you are being then represented exactly as you wish to be. And there is no room for error. There is no room for kind of misrepresentation, because if the journalist has picked up your content word for word that you have been happy to provide, then you are telling a story in your own words. You are getting your message out there exactly as you want it to be received. And that is a fabulous win. So putting the effort in to actually craft your story makes a lot of sense, because it means that you're in control of how that story is actually then presented. And it's increasing your chances of getting that story used, because if you are too lazy to really develop that story and to really put the time in to make it press ready, like you've got to give it to the journalist press ready. You don't want to give it to the journalist with loads of gaps. You don't want to give it to the journalist in a place where actually they've just got loads of question marks, because all that does is get them really cross. Like it just pees them off. So we can't be doing that if we want PR success. We can't be getting journalists angry and mad and frustrated. We want to be seen as helpful. We want to be seen as actually doing the work, as presenting them something on a plate that's a gift. So being too lazy is not really an option, because it's not going to get you very far. So what we've got to do, we've got to develop the story to a point where there's everything that they need in there. So you've really got to consider, when you send information to a journalist, are there any gaps? Is there anything that they feel like they might need to know after reading that? And if there is, give them that too. If you're at a point where you think, do you know what, it's all there, like there's really nothing that they could ask me now that would add any more value to this piece, then you're done. But if they can ask, so what? If they can ask, so what, after they have read what you have given them, you're not in a great place. Because the journalists don't have time for things that require more work. So if you have sent them something and they're like, okay, well, it's kind of marginally interesting, but so what? Like, what is the actual point of it? Or so what? Like, why is this important? Why is this a message that I need to help share? If they don't get that, then you're not going to get their support. So it's super, super important to put that time in to really build up the content to a point where they can't ask so what, where they don't have any question marks, and where they don't get cross, and actually they think that you're an absolute god for providing them with this piece on a plate. Now, sometimes, depending on the types of content that you're providing, or depending on the type of story that you've got, you might need to write that piece in a certain way. So if you are, let's say, announcing something, so let's say you're announcing that you've become a best-selling author, or let's say that you're announcing that you've won an award, or that you've launched a podcast, or something that's kind of newsy, then they expect that content to be written in a certain way. So they expect that content to be written as if it is a ready-made news article, and there's a certain style of writing that you've got to do to sort of tick those boxes. And they would prefer to have that information supplied to them as something called a press release, because the press release suits a format that is laid out as if it's a news article, and it's written in the third person as if that journalist has written it themselves. So they can basically take all the credit for you having written a piece that they can just lift and put in the newspaper. So if you've got something news related, it absolutely makes sense to work out how to craft that into an actual press release, because again, once they see it in a press release, they're going to think, oh, they've put some effort in here. They've put a bit of work in here, that they're helping me out here. And that's what you want to be seen to be doing. So there is definitely value in understanding how to craft a press release if you've got something news-based. If actually what you're trying to do is to just pitch your broader story, then you need to have written that up in a format, again, that's in the third person, that is just kind of laying that story out on a plate. So it's written ready-made, it's sharing the really key parts of your story, and it's written in a format that they could just lift. So it's written in third person, but you would probably also have a few quote marks in there of key things that you want to say and the way that you say those as if you're kind of quoting yourself. So the whole point of making the journalist's life easy is to save them time. But that does mean that you've got to put a bit of time in at the other end. But I think that's fair enough. If you're going to get free coverage and you're going to get potentially thousands of pounds worth of free exposure and potentially exposure to millions of people, I'd say that's worth putting a bit of effort in. So actually putting that time in to really present your story strongly enough is one of the most powerful pieces of work that you can do. Okay, number 3 mistake. And this one is actually something that women suffer with more. And that might sound really sexist, but it is just a fact in terms of the people that we deal with, our clients. Most women find this part harder than our male clients. And the number 3 mistake is being too modest. And I think you probably will align with this, and you will probably think of lots of times where you have done this. You've undersold yourself. Maybe someone's given you a compliment and you've kind of tried to bat it away, or maybe someone's kind of said, oh my God, well done, that's amazing. And you've played it down and you're like, oh, well, yeah, it's no big deal. Or you might talk about your corporate experience and other people go, oh my God, wow, that's incredible. And you're like, oh, well, not really. Like I just did this or I just did that. Or you downplay it. You try and take away the gravitas of whatever might have been attached to that situation. And this isn't what we need in PR, because in PR, we need to be bold and we need to stand out and we need to provide the media with confidence that we are worth being a spokesperson, that we are worthy of being an expert, that we have got a powerful story to tell. So if we're downplaying our expertise or our story or our background or our qualifications, it could be anything, then we're just doing ourselves an injustice and we are just making it harder for the journalists to pick us, because they will have somebody else who is more than happy to sing their own praises, who is more than happy to put their hands up and go, oh yeah, I'm an expert in that. And they might not even be as good as you. Quite probably they are not as good as you. But if they're the one that is putting their hand up, they're the one that's going to get chosen. And if they're the one that's coming across with confidence and conviction, they're the ones that are bring confidence to the journalists as well. And they have to be confident about the people that they put in front of their readers, because they've got a responsibility to, provide high level content. So being too modest is a massive PR mistake, because if you are not prepared to own your expertise, if you are not prepared to believe in yourself and what you've got to offer, then why should the journalists be prepared to believe in you? Why should they? They shouldn't. There's no sense in asking them to. So you have to really think about how to present yourself. And this is one of the things that I actually love the most about PR, is that PR is a massive leveler. So someone who is starting out in business can present themselves effectively on a level to someone who has been in business for 20 years, because they could both be quoted as an expert, let's say in the Telegraph. They could both be side by side in the same article, and no one would know that one of them had been in business for a week and one of them had been in business for 10 years. No one would know that. And that's why I love the power of PR, because PR gives you the power to create this profile and to really create this kind of momentum. And it's a huge leveler in terms of actually really putting you up there where you belong, even if you are really early in your PR journey. So we don't want modesty. We don't want shrinking violets. We don't want to be underplaying our qualifications or our credibility or any part of our story. We've got to believe in it and we've got to push it forward. And this might be why people work with us, because actually it can be really hard to do that yourself. So we have loads of clients that have tried to do PR themselves, and then they come to us because they're like, oh, I don't think I was totally behind it, or I don't think I was really giving it my all, because they were a bit embarrassed, or they were just feeling a bit too overwhelmed by it, or too scared to really, really push themselves. Whereas we are absolutely our clients' biggest champions, and we will literally position them in a way that makes them sound like the best person in the world in their field. And that's quite hard to do yourself. So I totally get it. If you're doing this, I totally get it. I do it myself. Like I'm not speaking to you from a place of being perfect. I'm just speaking to you from a professional perspective of, I know that actually when you're doing PR, you need to really own your stuff. You need to really stand up and be proud of who you are. And that can be tricky. I totally understand that can be tricky. So being too modest is not something that we want to be doing. Okay, mistake number 4. People think they are PR ready. Now, this is a funny one. So people who are doing their own PR and they are really confused as to why they're not getting success, because they think they've ticked all the boxes. So they've done a lot of the things that we've talked about. They've understood that they need to share their story. They've understood that they need to craft that story and to put some elements into it so that the journalists are not starting from scratch. And they've understood to a degree that they don't need to be modest, that they need to be shouting about themselves. And so they think they're PR ready. And quite often they've written some sort of PR introduction, and that's what they've been using to send out to the press. And this is great because it's a fabulous starting point, and it means that they have taken those first steps and that they are in motion in terms of getting PR ready. But quite often they just don't take that quite far enough. So it might be that they've introduced themselves on a very top level kind of way, and they've not just dug quite deep enough to have enough hooks, to have enough angles, to have enough to entice the media. Or it might be that it's just not quite written right. So some people think, oh, well, I'll pop together a couple of paragraphs and that can be like my bio. And what that's doing is it's doing one of the things that I was talking about earlier that's not a great thing to do, which is just providing more questions than answers. Because if all you give them is a couple of paragraphs, they're going to be left with loads more questions. They're going to be left with, well, what does that mean? Or what did that lead to? Or why did that happen? So when we create content for the media, we go in like with detail. We give them everything and then we give them top line. But we give them the resource of having that choice of having everything. So, and that's the media bio that we create. So the media bio is almost like your library of information, and then elements come out of that as the way that you then introduce yourself in different circumstances. But having something so powerful like that means that they've got access to everything if that's what they wish. So quite often it is that they haven't gone far enough with that information, that they haven't necessarily written it in the right way. So we talked about it having to be written third person. And the other thing that people do, which again, like if you don't know, you don't know, and you could think that this would be a cool thing to do. People often present their media information in the form of a PDF, in quite a fancy looking PDF quite often, with lots of images in and lots of fancy fonts and looking more like a kind of a poster than a piece of PR. And the problem with that is that that's not what the media want or need. So if they're trying to open that on their phone, which a lot of them work remotely, a lot of them work out and about, if they're trying to open that information on their phone, PDFs are not the best thing to be trying to open. Now, if they want to try and copy and paste some information out of there, PDFs are not the most helpful things to be able to do that with. So however pretty it looks, however much you think that it's making you look professional, actually, that's not the right thing to do. They just want a Word document that's got all the information on that they can either print, so it's got to be laid out nicely so they can print it, or they can copy and paste it and they can use elements from it that way. So sometimes what you think might be a good move isn't always the right thing if you just don't know quite the detail of how the journalists like to be communicated with. So a few things to think about there. If you're doing any of those things, maybe just have a little review and consider what things you might want to change. So point number 5, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is images. And this is where sometimes people fall at the last hurdle because they might have done everything else right. They might have really crafted that story and really found the angles and really made it really media friendly. But then the media will come back and say, oh, this is fabulous. I love it. Have you got some images? And they're like, oh, what kind of pictures do you want? And If you don't have media-ready photos, that can be an absolute deal breaker. Because what the media need, they need to fill their pages and they need those pages to look visually engaging. So this has happened to us before, where we have secured a fabulous national piece and the client has then refused to send the pictures and it's all fallen through. And they refused to send the pictures because they didn't have the ones that they actually wanted, but also they weren't comfortable with sharing the images that they had, so they didn't like the pictures that they had. And when it came to putting them in the national media, they suddenly had a freak out and were like, actually, I don't want those published. So if you don't have images, you're not going to get the coverage. And if it gets to the point of you having those opportunities, what have you got in the bank? Have you got press-friendly images? Have you had a brand shoot? Have you got images that are clean, that are not cluttered, that don't have millions of other people in there, not selfies? Like, do you have professional pictures? And if you don't, and if you can't afford to have professional branding shoots done, that's not a problem, but it's about creating images that are just the right style and the right look. So you need to be having a look at the publications that you want to be in, have a look at the type of style of photos that there are. And even if you get a friend to take them on an iPhone, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't need to be a professional photographer, but you have to have the right sort of style of photo. And you need to consider like the positioning of that picture as well. So some pictures we might need to be landscape for certain publications. Some might need to be portrait. Whichever ones you don't want to have like a fussy background, you want to make sure that the picture's been taken in a very precise way. And ideally you want the picture to illustrate the story as well. So you need to think about, well, what are these pictures going to go with? What is the content that I'm going to put out there? What is the story I'm trying to tell? And ideally, you want an image that is going to match that's going to actually help tell that story, because that massively increases your chances. So on the flip side of not producing images and getting features cancelled, we have had features expanded because we've had such fabulous pictures. So we've ended up getting a double page spread rather than a single page because they couldn't choose between which images to use and they were all amazing. So they put them all in, which meant that they had to give us more space. So the power of photography is super intense. And the other thing about photography is it gives you a chance to get your character across. And this is something that we've talked about previously when we've been talking about the things that make PR powerful, is using it to really illustrate you, using it as an opportunity to bring your character out and to really illustrate your values and what you stand for, because we want to use PR to show our individuality and we want to show what makes us different and what makes us stand out and what is going to make people to connect to us rather than someone else. So images can obviously really help you do that. And if you're prepared to be a little bit playful with them, then all the better. So don't fall at that last hurdle and don't let your PR be sabotaged by not having great images. Now, that is just 5 things that people potentially do wrong. 5 top mistakes that we see. There are loads and loads of other ones, including not building up relationships with journalists and just cold pitching to them, including sending the same message to 10 billion people and just BCCing them. That's a pretty fatal flaw. Including giving up too soon. You know, PR is a long game. And if you send out one press release and it doesn't work and you think, well, that's me, I'm a PR failure, then you're not going to get much further. So giving up is another mistake that people make, because actually you need to really commit to consistency in PR. So there are lots and lots of things that, you can fall kind of down these holes, you can get stuck in these pit holes. But I'm hoping that this podcast is helping you not make these mistakes, because I'm hoping that all the other episodes that you've been listening to are helping you understand how to do this stuff properly. And so then you're not going to fall down these holes. You're not going to be got by these pitfalls. But I think it's useful to just have these red flags as well in terms of, right, I'm definitely not going to do that, because if I do that, I know that I'm sabotaging my PR success, and that's not what we want. So I hope that was useful. I wonder whether you were doing any of those things. And if you were, do not stress about it. Just take the action to fix it. And that's all you can do. So I hope that's helped power you on with a little bit more inspiration, a little bit more insights into how PR actually works. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to PR Powerhouse with me, Jo Swan. If you want to feel empowered and supported and excited about getting in the press, come and join us in our free community over on Facebook at PR You Can Do It. I would absolutely love to see you there so I can help you take those next steps to getting in the media.